Today we're going to talk about the CM at Risk case study, Freeman Hall expansion on the Clemson University campus. We have Kevin McDonough from Clemson University. He's a project manager here, and he's going to first talk about his professional experience and then the case study.
Thank you for that background. Thank you for that introduction. A little bit about my background. I'm an architect by degree and have worked through my career either designing in private offices or working as a project manager, as an owner's representative, mostly in the healthcare and higher education fields, such as I'm doing now here at Clemson. Before we get into reviewing our case study today, I would like to give you a little bit of background about how CM at Risk procurement method is sought after with Clemson University for our projects. Clemson University, being a state institution, is required to follow the state procurement code when it comes to soliciting the services of a contractor. By doing that, the procurement code presently with the state requires that all projects be done in the design bid build method of procurement. If there's any wish to use an alternate delivery method, the agency, as we would be with the state, is required to request using an alternate delivery method. We have to write up that request, which includes a description of the project, our rationale for wanting to look at something different, our experience with doing alternate delivery method projects, as well as some background of the project manager who will be responsible for the project. All these things were undertaken. As far as this project went, I was a project manager and was responsible for developing those requests and submitting them to the state, requesting, in this case, an alternate delivery method of CM at Risk. We could also be looking at design build, which is another one. But generally, we do not do design build projects. So that's how we got to this project, CM at Risk. We were approved for it and proceeded along those lines. With that background, let's get into the case study itself. A little bit on the description of the project. Freeman Hall is on the main campus of Clemson University. It is the project itself is in addition to an existing facility that was originally built in the 1920s. It's for the industrial engineering department. It has always been that, and a good portion of the building is a large box structure, 2 stories, that house the industrial engineering machinery, equipment, that sort of thing. And on the front of it was a section of classrooms and faculty offices, restrooms, that sort of thing. That front portion was to be demolished and a new addition added to it that would provide a new visual entrance and identification for the industrial engineering department. The facility is about 22,000 square feet, the addition, and it houses a large auditorium, some collaboration spaces, all the faculty offices, the administration for the industrial engineering department, as well as a very large graduate room, office, and workroom for them. That was done to help to develop the graduate program for the department. There's also some support facilities, new restrooms, elevator, that sort of thing. As was noted, it is 22,000 square feet, about $10 million total budget, which meant that the construction was around $7.2 million. All State facilities are also required to be at least LEED certified silver. So that is what we designed the Freeman Edition to be. And in the end, actually, took a few years to get all the information in at the end. And when the points were put together, Freeman Hall was awarded LEED Gold. You will see listed the team that we had put together, both of the design architects and engineers, as well as the CM for the project. I will not read them off, but they are the ones that made this project a success. We have some renderings, early renderings of the project. This project was on a very tight site in what could almost be considered an urban site. We have city blocks, stop signs, bus stops, high density buildings next to each other in a very, very active area of campus. It's a corner structure. For those of you who may not know the campus very well, it's the corner of Fernald Street and South Palmetto Boulevard. It is a slope site, as the renderings can show you, which added, as we will discuss later on, to the complexity of doing the work. Again, it's an addition, so behind it is the existing structure. And at the top of the site, the next facility is Fernald Cafe, and part of their charge was to create a courtyard that tied the Fernald Cafe's terrace to this project. There's a rendering from the upper level, and it does show a little bit of the new courtyard and the terrace off to the left. We have an interior rough sketch done by the architects. And this is pretty much how it ended up being. We have a grand atrium with a formal staircase going from the lower level up to the mid-level. And halfway up that staircase is a large landing with the main entrance to the auditorium. The back of the auditorium is curved, which is demonstrated on the outside of it by this rendering, with quite a bit of windows, quite a bit of fenestration for this area. There is a balcony off to the right, and that is a collaboration area. It is a wonderful, wonderful place to come and work and concentrate. The objectives we're going to be looking at, some contractual information, the selection process, and the committee that makes it up for the selection, fees and incentives, some technology that was important at the time, schedule, and site. Our contractual background for this, both for the architect and the contractor, these are separate contracts. Each of them is with the owner, and as I am the owner's representative, the contracts are with me, and I help develop them and negotiate them with both the design consultants and the contractor. At the time that this was done, which was, let's see, about 5-6 years ago, the contract method was using the AIA documents with the standard AIA 201 general conditions accompanying it, and the state added an additional group of forms that was their addendum specific to our state requirements. Just recently, the state has completed new forms in contract and in negotiation with the AIA directly. They created South Carolina specific AIA documents, which combines all those into one contractual agreement that has really streamlined what we deal with. The architect was a fixed fee, and that generally came in two parts. They're hired initially to do a schematic design and estimate, schematic level estimate. Once we have really confirmed that the initial design is within budget that we want, we as the agency request additional funds, the remaining funds for the project. And once those are approved, we can release the architect to move into design development. It is generally around that time that we try our best to get our CM on board. And as we discuss the CM at risk process and benefits at the end, you will see how that is important to us. The selection process, the state, again, they have guidelines for all their processes for hiring different entities, procuring services and such. The CM at risk process is no different. We actually go above and beyond the state requirement. We do a two-step process where we request from any consultants to submit an RFQ, a request for qualifications, and they submit that based on an advertisement we put in a state newsletter where all requests for services are placed. So any contractor can respond to that. We have a description of the project, a dollar value, and they submit qualifications. We have a committee, which we'll discuss in a little bit more detail momentarily, that will shortlist from the RFQs to pick 3 or 4 to proceed to an interview process and a submission of a proposal, and that is what is called our RFP, or request for proposals. We use a selection committee for this. We actually do the same process when hiring the services of our design consultants also, and the same committee stays through between the consultants and the picking the construction manager. Generally, the committee's makeup is with the VP of Finance and Operations. There's usually one board member who's a trustee, board of trustees member, the capital projects or Clemson director, the Clemson University's project manager, which in this project's case was myself. We have one representative from the Office of Access and Equity, and that's for looking at the equal opportunity aspects when hiring a contractor. And at least 1 or 2 members from the user group. We have one representative from the architectural consultant, and an project manager who has been assigned to us from the Office of the State Engineer is actually the chair of the committee. We have a couple of examples of a score sheet that we use as we evaluate the 3 or 4 individuals once a proposal has been submitted. We look at the proposal and score it, and then we interview each of the candidates, and depending on the scores that are achieved for each of those items by the committee, we rank the individuals from 1 to 4 or 1 to 3 and begin contract negotiation with whoever the top potential candidate is. Until we reach contract completion or success, we cannot proceed forward with this, because if we are not able to negotiate a contract, we move to the next individual on the list and so forth until we have a contractor on board. As far as fees go, we had already touched on the architecture fees, which are fixed fees, and the CM at risk, depending on how you utilize our services, we use them for 2 distinctly different aspects of the project. We hire them for pre-construction services, and then we hire them for construction management during construction. it's the pre-construction services that really are where the ability to use a CM at risk becomes evident. They have a fixed fee that is negotiated for the pre-construction services, and then the CM, construction management portion of the job, is usually a percentage of the cost of the work. For this particular project, we weren't quite sure where we were with the budget right up until we got moving with the project, and the landscape services were actually left out at the time. We negotiated them during the middle of the project as we felt that we had the funds available to do the work, and the landscape did end up being done near the end of the project. Incentives are available to the contractor in a CM at risk contract. It's generally in there as an option. You can choose to do it or not do it, but savings generally that we look at, if we do that, get divided up between the agency or the owner, which is us, 75%, and the contractor, 25%. And the incentives come from savings from the GMP that was established that don't include any leftover contingency that is used. So if a contractor, for example, finds material that can be substituted at a less cost than was initially budgeted and intended to be put in, that cost savings gets put aside and potentially can be used or divided up at the end of a project. As far as technology for this particular project, we were going back about 4 years or so. 3D modeling, Revit and BIM was in its early stages. The architect was using Revit at the time and did use it for their documents, but most of the consultants that they had on their team did not have that capability, and so they used CAD-based documentation. Now, going from Revit to CAD is a little bit easier, but you obviously can't go from CAD to 3D. So most of the information ended up as CAD documents. As far as other technology, of course, we have the email and electronic storage of our documents. We also used iPads on site so that both the architect and the CM, as well as myself, when we were meeting at our owner and architect and contractor meetings, we all used those. We used them on site so that we were all looking at the same thing at the same time and responding to the same issues. Some of the background related to this project as far as funding goes is that initially when the project was designed and the CM was on board doing pre-construction services, it was felt that the project was going to be over budget for what the users were really interested in having in terms of a building. They did put it out for pricing, and the original budget was $6.5 million, and it was evident that the project was going to be over budget if we continued to keep the design as it was. The interest was very strong that if we took anything out of the project, less in square footage or less in some of the services that were in the building, that the department would not be able to get out of it what they really felt they needed to. So our institution went back to the state to request additional funds, which does not happen that often. And the state did eventually approve the additional funding. although it was held up waiting for that approval for about a year. One of the advantages of having a CM on board for that was that we did not have to go out and rebid to hire a new contractor. The CM remained under our contract at the time and continued to assist us as we transitioned from the smaller budget to the larger one. And they were able to move right in and continue on once we got the approval. Some of the aspects of the site, again, it was mentioned this is a very tight site, it's sloped, and effective management was important because of the tight site. On-time delivery was utilized. There was very little room on the site, and most of it was about where the courtyard was intended to be. There could be lay-down space, but you also needed room for some of the service vehicles to move around and piles of dirt to be placed that you didn't necessarily want to be removed from the site yet. So on-time delivery was very important. We also had to deal with, again, being an urban site. This was not a green field. It had been utilized for other things in the past, and there were large quantities of utilities that crossed the site as well as out in the road, and those had to be dealt with initially in order to begin the work of constructing the new facility itself. So there was some complex planning, logistics was very important, and figuring out your steps to go through schedule-wise to accomplish the various things. One of the avenues that we took that we were able to utilize was to close off a section of the road for Now Street, which was one lane in each direction at the time, and we were able to encumber one of those lanes and turn Canal Street into a one-way road, which lasted for a year. It worked out very well, and it also allowed us with our deliveries to direct our delivery trucks in one end of the site fencing along this one lane that had been encumbered, drop off their material, and pull out from the other end of the site. So there was a good flow of materials and vehicles in order to bring these various things to the site. Some of the interesting challenges that having a construction manager helped with were some of the new technologies that we had put in terms of different building materials, different types of constructions, and one application, a brand new type of mechanical system that had not been used on the campus previously. It's called a chilled beam system, and our own maintenance folks were not well versed in its use and its functions, so there was large training that had to be done by the contractor when the project was ready to be turned over. They were well aware of the type of system and were able to also choose the right mechanical subcontractor to install this system in order for it to work appropriately. Without that kind of background and knowledge by the CM, we would not have been able to put in a brand new system like that and really feel comfortable that we had the right mechanical sub to do the work. Here we'll see a few photos. We have a demolition, which was the first step in clearing the site, the old 1929 front end of the structure. And we also have a picture of some of the issues you deal with. Even the best planning does not always cover you for some of the unknowns you may come across. We're in the middle of putting a large footing together and found that a chilled water line that ran across the site was about 3 feet higher than was designated on the existing drawings. So we were able to, once we realized that and were able to expose it, we could work around that sufficiently. Another photo of the front of the facility. You can see all the glass that there is. Brings in a lot of light to the grand stair and atrium. It has been a wonderful area to congregate. This shows you we're a little further along. On the right-hand side is the new addition, two stories at this point, and behind it is the existing facility that's getting a new skin on the front of it with the same brick that's on the new facility to tie in the two. The area in front is about all the space that we had available as lay-down space, where to park our vehicles, trash, everything that is an important aspect for a construction project. We see some structure going up, some steel going up in one of the photos. There were some fascinating structural designs in this with cantilevers, mostly that really amazed me what they were able to do. We have a couple of conference rooms that basically cantilever out over some of the open atrium area, and it was excellent to be able to see this come together as it did. Another picture as we get further along with the exterior of the building. We can see the atrium space, and we can see another unique application of a material up above is terracotta, and it's used here as a rain screen. It is also the first time that this rain screen system has been used on campus, and it's quite successful, and it really has given a dramatic look to the front of the facility. Another photo of the other end of the facility, the upper end, showing how the different sort of facets or sections of the buildings look and come together. We have a brick section, we have our glass concourse area, we have the terracotta piece. That's up where the faculty offices are, and below it is the atrium, all coming together. Here's how that rendering, way at the beginning of the presentation here, has come out. It is developing, as I said, pretty much along the lines of how that initial sketch was, and really provides a grand statement to the area. The curved outside of the auditorium will end up being finished up with a real wood veneer, and looks very striking. We can see now, nearing the end of the project, a lot of the construction fencing is down, but where the service vehicles are parked was the one lane that we had procured for the time being of the project. With all that being shown and giving you a better feel for the project itself, I want to bring this around to why we felt that the CM at risk procurement method was of value to this project. As you can see, we had many issues: tight site, there were connectivity issues, both visual with the design elements as well as physical with our courtyard and the adjacent terrace. We had buildings behind us that we tied into. We had buildings adjacent to us that we were going to connect to with paths. We were in an urban site with many utilities underneath, heavy traffic, heavy pedestrian traffic. We had a schedule that was very tight. Once we got going again, our whole schedule was based on having this facility ready for the next available fall semester, a year after the project. and that date wasn't going to change. All those items were in consideration when we were looking at this project and the method we used. And with the flexibility of bringing a contractor on board early, one, to help us with our budgeting, to begin pricing materials and methods of construction, as well as planning the logistics of how we bring our materials on site and our sequence of operation of the construction, so that they aren't stepping on themselves and getting in each other's way as they're building this facility, all with the schedule in mind. It also allowed us to, instead of having to bid the job all at once and wait until we get bids in and see if we have a low bidder and such, we developed our GMP, our guaranteed maximum price, and we allowed the contractor to release early packages. Even before we were completed with our design, we released our site package so that they could get a jump on all the site work that had to be done, utilities and the foundations and footings. We released our steel package early for pricing and fabrication. As you could see from one of the pictures, it was an immense amount of steel work going on, and steel is a very long lead item, both in the fabrication of the material and the review of the submittals to make sure that we were getting what we had designed. And that allowed that to get done early. We also have another advantage of CM at risk is that the state also requires, when we do procurement, that there is a double-digit percentage of involvement from minority business enterprises and women-owned business enterprises. And sometimes that's hard to achieve in a regular design bid build scenario. With that requirement of the state and our CM at risk method, it allows our CM to go out and procure some of those services from some of those subs more directly and without having to necessarily worry about low bid and that sort of thing. And we have always been able to attain greater than double-digit, greater than 10% participation from these, specifically because of this method and this flexibility that we are able to use to obtain their services.
Okay. Well, thank you, Kevin, very much. We enjoyed having you.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed presenting this case study. It's a wonderful facility.